Hello, and welcome to my series of talks on multicultural communication. My name is Marquita Byrd, or as my students call me, Dr. B. And the purpose of the show is to help us to become aware of our multicultural nature of this country, of the United States, and also to learn to appreciate that diversity. Uh, Another goal is to help us to learn to communicate better in a multicultural society because without good communication, we're not able to live together in an effective way. Now, I don't want to lie and say that communication is the answer to all problems. Of course, it's not. But communication can help us to move to better solutions without harming each other. So today, my first session, and thank you for being here with me, we're going to talk about living in a multicultural society because that's a very important lesson that we need to know. Now, let me talk about my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood of about 600 people in the Bay Area. My neighborhood is very diverse. Right at my house on the corner where I live, I have neighbors who are from East Asia, and basically East Asian, grew up in Fiji. I have a Filipino family next door. I have what I'm really thrilled about is a old soldier from South Vietnam who fought with us in the Vietnam War. Across the street, I have neighbors who are wildlife specialists, and it's a white family, and sometimes they may come outside with a snake in their hand. I always tell them to stay away from my house, but it is interesting to find out about that. Next to them, there's a Mexican family, and then there's a gay couple. We have homes where they're elderly here, and we see the elderly walking around the neighborhood in the evening, which is really great. When I go out, come home in the evening, often I see children who are playing in the street, and I have to be careful, drive slow. Everybody in the park does, and since I've been here 20 years, I haven't seen one child get hurt, which is fantastic, which means that we're being aware that children are in our neighborhood and that we must be safe drivers in order to keep them safe. So it's an exciting place to live. We share foods for the holidays. We see each other in our dress clothes, our traditional clothes, on celebrations, and so I learn a lot. I take this as an opportunity to become more informed as an American citizen. I grew up in the South, predominantly black neighborhoods, and so this is opening up everything for me. Let's go on to talk about the fact that America is actually a mirror of the whole world. Sometimes people will say, I've heard people from other countries say, well, before I came here, I thought it was a white nation. I said, why? They said, because all we saw were white people on TV. And we have to remember that what goes on our televisions shapes the image of us in the world. And they said, when I got here and I saw people of color, I was very surprised. Well, the fact is that America is a microcosm of the world, and that everybody's here, people of every race, every gender. So we are a mirror of the world. Let's talk about some of the demographics. Demographics are simply labels that we use to describe a population. This is not a uh, this is not a finite list, but it's going to tell us something about who we are. In America, we have people of all races, and right now, 2019, our population has about 69% European Americans, about 15% African Americans, 6% Asian Americans. Native Americans are less than 1%, which is alarming, and Pacific Islanders are about 6%. Hispanics are 25%. So that kind of makes up, in a general way, how our population goes. What we need to be thinking about this because by 2043, which is what our census tells us, America is going to be about 49% European American. African Americans are still going to be about 15%. Hispanic Americans are going to be maybe 30%. Pacific Islanders, 8%. Native Americans still only 1% or less than 1%. In America, things are changing. Our population is changing. For one thing, we are graying. The baby boomers are already in their 60s. I'm part of that group. I got gray hair, and we're going to see much more of that, and therefore our priorities and social services will change. And we're also browning, which means that there are more people who are people of color, and that frightens some people who already thought of America as a people of European descent, but that's not exactly true. So we're changing that way. Let's go on to talk about demographics of gender. In America and in the world, women are about 51% of the population, men are about 49%, and we have various reasons why that's a little bit different. Gay and lesbian community is anywhere from 15 to 20%. We have 20% of our population are youth, children, people under 18, and about 20% of our population are seniors. When we talk about religion, Christianity is the dominant religion in America, but we also have other religions. We have Muslims, we have Jews, we have Buddhists, we have all sorts of people here. And so that makes for some interesting things. Instead of us being fearful of them, we should go and find out about what they are. So we have a vast, very diverse population um, in all areas. We could talk about class, of course. We have people who are the elite. We have people in America who are in the top 1%. And then we have people in America who are along with the poorest in the world. Our population, our middle class is shrinking, it's getting smaller, and people who are poor, the number is getting larger. So we have class differences. Some people want to say, oh, there's no class in America, but that is not true. So we have class distinctions, we have gender distinctions, we have racial distinctions, and we have religious. Let's talk about able and disabled. In the population, again, in the United States and the whole world, disabled people represent about 20% of the population. And yet we still design buildings and we design public facilities for people who are not disabled. We're not still not building homes, schools in a way that all people have access. And that is something that we're working on. We need to work more on in the 21st century. So we have the disabled here. Some people say, oh, they don't fit, but it could be just that we are not accommodating everybody in the population. So we have a diversity also in that age, ability, race, gender, class, religion. Many people add ethnicity, and you may be asking yourself, what the heck is the difference between race and ethnicity? Ethnicity has to do with everything that you learn, a group of people have learned, whereas race uh, has to do with ways that we describe populations of humans different. We know from our genetics that there's no races of human beings. There's a human race, and then we have some minor differences that we make into big problems. So we are a diverse nation. This is not new. Some people feel that diversity is something that's just happening now, but America has been a diverse nation since the beginning, since the first Europeans stepped their feet onto the continental U.S. We've been diverse because, of course, that was the first nation was here. The indigenous people were here, and then when European explorers came here, we had diversity. And we tend to think that when they got here, the Native Americans just kind of disappeared into the wilderness, but no, they were here in the colonies. Also in the colonies, we had, of course, people from African descent who unfortunately came here in bondage, but they did make up a good percentage of the population of the colonies. Guess what? Gay people were here in the colonies. How do we know that? Because there were some colonies that had laws that promised death if you were found to be engaged in sodomy, and that was a euphemism for sex among gays. So we had gays here. In 1578, the first Filipino people arrived. They arrived on a ship to work in the cotton fields and various other things. We had Muslims here. Yes, we had Christians here of all denominations, but we also had Muslims here because many of the people who came from Africa were already members of Islam. So these things have been here since the beginning, of course. We had men here, we had women here, and sometimes we forget that women were here. We get stories of the West, and it seems like no women were there, but they were there. Of course, we had children here. We had people who were seniors. We had people of all walks of life at the beginning of the nation. And now into the 21st century, we're becoming aware of that diversity, but it's not new. Now, have you ever heard the term same but different? Same but different. I used to hear people say that, and I would think, oh my gosh, that doesn't sound very smart. In fact, it sounds uh, like gobbledygook, some people say. But now that I've been doing more thinking about diversity, I've come to understand that in a different way. We are the same difference. Human beings are the same in that we're our biological units. We are bipedal. We have two sexes, but they're basically the same, except for sexual organs. We all need to eat. We all need to sleep. We want to keep our family safe. We all have clothing. We all need water. We need a place to put our people. We all need land. We all need housing. So we are the same in that sense, in that we have the same needs. We are different in that we answer those needs in a different way. That's a small thing. But when I look at someone that I think is different from me, I remember that we are all human beings. For example, I lived in an apartment complex where there are a lot of Vietnamese people. And I always heard when I was growing up, well, oh, African Americans are very loud. Black people are very loud. And I moved into the complex, and wow, there was a cacophony of sound. And I found that Vietnamese people like karaoke, and so they will be in their house, and the windows, doors will be open, and you could hear people singing. I thought that was exciting because I like music. Um, I talked to the neighbors near me. We talked about things that were going on, and I found out, oh, okay, we're the same. We have different beliefs, different cultures, but we are basically the same kind of people. All of us are concerned about having a good life for our children, number one. We're all concerned about keeping our environment safe so that we could work unimpeded. We all wanted good schools for our children, those sorts of things. We're all trying to provide food. We all had to go to work. We were very similar. And so finding those similarities was a very important thing. Not only that, but I became aware of these things um, in my professional life and my personal life. As my first teaching job was in a special ed class, and oh wow, I walked in with a lot of trepidation. I'm not trained as a special ed teacher, but they had a need in the high school, so I went, and I wasn't sure how I was going to teach them. So I walked in and I asked, "What is it that you want to learn?" Which is a good way to teach anybody. I said, "What are you interested in learning about?" Because people were complaining, "Oh, they don't learn; they're not interested." Firsthand, I want to learn how to fill out a job application. This was high school students, and I thought, well, that sounds like a typical junior or senior. How do I fill out a job application? Then, secondhand, I want to find out how to make that girl like me. What teenage boy is not interested in, or teenagers in general want to know how to get other people to like them. I want to know how to do better in my art class, and it just washed over me. These are the same students as others that I've taught. I'm trained to teach a secondary education. I found that whether they're able or disabled, special needs or gifted, they have the same needs. My second area where I found out that people who look very different and I thought was very different were actually the same. When I went to my son who is disabled, he is disabled with muscular dystrophy, and I went to his sheltered workshop, which is a place that we have for disabled young adults to learn job skills, to learn social skills, etc., and so forth. And when I walked in, and saw these many people, I was overcome with grief. And I felt oppressed. And I felt, oh my gosh, look at all these people who are sad and disabled. And I felt that they were suffering. But I had to go there to see what my son was doing and to make sure that he was being taken care of. So as I would go visit and I would have lunch, I realized that no, they weren't suffering. They were just like all the rest of us. The big conversation was who was dating who, and what my mom did I didn't like, and what kind of job I want. And the sorrow lifted from me as I realized that people all walks of life can have joy. I also walked in thinking that I had to like every disabled person, and I met some people that I wasn't liking too much. I realized it's okay to do that, but I cannot disrespect them. I cannot take away their rights, but it's okay for us not to get along well. Uh, so that was a big learning for me. Now let's talk about some guidelines. What can we do? What do we need to remember in order to work well? The first thing is that we need to understand that America is a unit. It is a contained unit within the 48 contiguous states, and then of course we have Hawaii and Alaska. And in a unit, one thing changes and everything else changes. We are in the same country and we are a unit. I don't care how we try to make ourselves different. Secondly, we are interdependent. Interdependence means that we cannot reach our goals independently. So we have major goals for this country that cannot be met without all of us working together for that to succeed. For one thing, we want to remain a nation. And in order to remain a nation and a highly effective nation, we must work together. C, we must understand that all of us have the same rights. Now, of course, as in every nation, civil rights change. Civil rights have to do with the rights of the citizen. Universal human rights are those that the UN declared in 1948, which suggest that people, no matter where they are, have the same rights. For example, all human beings have a right to good living conditions. All human beings have the right to a language. Human beings have the right to free access of information. All human beings have the right to be able to communicate, etc., and so forth. All human beings have a right to an identity. So the Declaration suggests that we all have the same human rights. Lastly, each person in this country must be treated with respect and with regard. They have to have unconditional acceptance. That does not mean that you have to like everything they do, but you do have to accept them as human beings who have the right to make their own decisions. These are just a few of the guidelines that we need to remember in order to be a citizen, to be in a society that works well. Let's go on to say that we do want our society to uh, prosper into the future. Wilma Killer, Wilma Mankiller, the first principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, said that when we plan for the future, we plan for 8 generations ahead. We tend to think of only one or two to our grandkids, but we need to plan for 8 generations ahead. And in order to have a nation that's going to last that long, we must find ways to live together in a way that doesn't harm, that is beneficial for all society. And you may say, why should I care about everybody in society? Because happens in among the least of us happens to all of us. For example, when we have a ballot measure to increase school taxes, of course, I'm an educator, so I always vote for those. But the fact is, if we don't ever educate every child, if we let poor neighborhoods remain with low resources, when those children can't find a job, when they are without housing, they're not just going to commit crimes in their neighborhood. They're going to come over to your house and commit crimes and steal your stuff. And so, in order for us to have a place for all of the children, we need to remember that all of the children are our responsibility. So, I'd like for you to hope to come back for another episode and go along with me on this journey to learn about multicultural communication. Please check out the PowerPoint at the end of the video where you can get more information, also an outline of this lecture to learn more about it. And this is Dr. B. I am leaving you with the words of Mr. Spock: live long and prosper.